Looking back.
Can't help but dance to that. This is an article from Newsweek, February 1st, 2022, in which we are told that Pastor Greg Locke of Global Vision Bible Church announced a book burning. In his sights for the fiery pit are such items as that Harry Potter books, Twilight books, Ouija boards, tarot cards, healing crystals, idol statues, spell books, and other witchcraft-related items. On Facebook, he expanded by calling the event a continued series on deliverance from demons and stated, "If you think we are crazy, then scroll on. We're exposing the kingdom of darkness for what it is. It's time for people to be delivered. Don't think you're crazy. You are, however, wrong." He also stated that he won't compromise with devil worshippers, seemingly forgetting that the devil is part of his own mythology and has very little, if anything at all, to do with any of the items he's burning. Locke has previously stated that we can't unsee the miracles that are happening around us. I'd like to ask him if there is any chance we could see said miracles first, as unseeing something that hasn't happened is pretty hard to do. And if creating his own little narrative about perfectly innocent items, maybe not Twilight, that's awful, isn't enough, Locke has also, according to the article, pushed COVID-19 misinformation and previously branded the pandemic as fake. He's also discouraged his supporters from getting inoculated against the virus during his sermons. So, pretty much an all-round tit. What are your thoughts on it, guys?
All right. Erin, would you like to start us
Okay. My first impression of this, it might come as a shock to a lot of people, but I had my first introduction to burning literature was in the 90s when I went to Christian church camp. So we also burned the things. We burned Harry Potter and the Ouija boards or whatever you may have brought to camp that had the demonic spirits in it. I have very distinct memories of standing outside that bonfire, looking over at the fires in anticipation of colorful spirits to actually come rising up out of the flames. So part of me feels like this is crazy, but a lot of me has compassion for the fact that I actually believe those things. And I think that some people, I know that a lot of people in Locke's congregation do actually believe that there are things in this world that can attach themselves to material items and have influence over your life. However, I think that this demonstration of his does not a lot of good in his own community or on people looking from the outside at this. I think that if we were to break down some of the parameters of the bite model, we might see some areas where this would fall into some culty behaviors. The first ones that came to my mind were behavior control and information control. Obviously, doing something like this is a demonstration in behavior. Having people participate in an event like this can do a lot for stoking the fears of congregants, increasing the intensity and fanaticism of the people that are attending this. It can also bring almost like a group, well, it does bring this kind of in-group closer and causes a bigger rift between us versus them. Information control, which is the I in the bite model, obviously it's information control. They're putting a line in the sand of what information is okay for them to see and what ones are deemed unacceptable and need to be destroyed. I think it's pretty extreme, but I mean, this isn't anything new for Greg Locke. I think that it's a continued expression of his to push against the nerves of people and against the sensibilities of the general public to try to get that pushback that he's looking for so that he can claim persecution. So that's my initial response when I saw that. I said, okay, so he's going to act this way and then he's going to respond in, shock when people think that it's bizarre what he's doing.
Yeah, that's so poignant, because I feel like kind of similar to the first article, my first response to this was honestly kind of banal. Like, it's definitely not good. I don't think that he's doing this for the reasons you pointed out, that it's he's burning specifically objects to like control the perception of the parishioners about like what information is acceptable and all that. But like in and of itself, I don't know if I really care that much. Like if you want to have a bonfire and you're gonna chuck random shit in it, like be my guest. It's not my bonfire. But like I think that's a really good point, that the reason Greg Locke specifically does this is because he wants to get under the skin of the general public and be like, ooh, I'm burning these things that are so popular that everyone holds dear. And he really just wants to do it to piss people off. It doesn't seem like it really actually has that much basis in like, I last time I remember reading the Bible, I don't remember there being any things about burning the demons out of your books, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just about the outside, which I do agree with you guys both. I totally agree that it is to fire people up, but I think it's also to fire the congregants up in the other direction, right? It's really to get people really to feel galvanized against the outsiders and galvanized against these books and these concepts and these ideas. Because I don't know if it, like, there's this thing with group psychology where if you add that emotion in and get everyone really hyped up, they'll start to really believe stuff and get emotional towards stuff that otherwise would be really ridiculous. Like if he just sat down calmly and said, now nobody read Harry Potter, you'd have the same thing that happened with Dan Brown, where people were told not to read the what is it called, Angels and Demons or whatever, that book. Christian sales skyrocketed because pastors were telling them not to read it, right? So the best way to get parishioners to really galvanize on your side is to do these like big extravagant things that cause a lot of emotion. And so I think that it's pretty ridiculously brilliant. Like I think it's stupid because they have to buy the books in order to burn them. So I mean, the companies and the people are certainly not suffering having a few copies of their books or games burned, and it's free advertising for them when it becomes newsworthy. So they're not hurting anybody. It's pretty asinine, but I do think it's very effective toward like what Erin was saying, toward building a greater divide and setting up a stronger us versus them scenario.
Yeah, it made me laugh when I first saw the article because, and I understand what Erin is saying about it being like, for the people involved in this is real. These things are real. But I've never been involved in it, and I'm from the outside completely. And especially now, when we're like in 2022, and this is something that you'd have expected. I was around during the Satanic Panic, when like people were burning records the first time round, and this is just like, it's really, you're still doing this kind of thing. You still think it has an effect all these years later, and so it's kind of comedic in a way that is doing something so like pointless, but it is kind of a reflection of a more important thing, and that's cultural objects being destroyed, like important cultural objects. And I'm not for I made the Twilight joke earlier. I'm not for 1 second suggesting that these things aren't culturally important, because of course things like the Harry Potter books, they've had a real cultural impact. But when you look back at the kind of historical artifacts that have been destroyed as well from religious groups, that's, it's a smaller, more comedy version of that. But by the same token, it is a reflection of that. And there are items that are thousands of years old that have been destroyed that have real cultural and historical significance.
Yeah. In fact, the other 2 articles. Oh, go ahead, Arden.
No, go ahead. You're rolling. Keep it up.
Okay, so the other 2 articles do discuss that. They talk about the artifacts and the sites that ISIS destroyed. And I think that that's a really, really important point to make, is that this might seem really sort of almost comical or asinine, and it's not really doing anything. And yeah, they had to buy the books, and so it's not really a big deal. But it kind of is, because we're talking about the symbolic destruction of a piece of culture or history that this specific group doesn't agree with or doesn't like. And when you talk about their followers or what impact it has on other people, you're talking about information control. So we're going to destroy the information that we think is bad. And even though these people, in the case of Locke, these people still have access to other versions of the book. So they're online, like they're not going away or going anywhere. But it does control their perception of those books and how they're going to approach them. Now you have ISIS destroying stuff. When it's gone, it's gone. It's never coming back. And so now you're talking about taking pieces of history and taking pieces of culture that a specific group doesn't like and destroying it for the purposes of controlling the narrative to their supporters, right? And perhaps even pissing off the outsiders, like kind of riling things up a little bit.
Yeah, I think kind of comparing it to like the more extreme versions of like what ISIS done is an interesting comparison. And I think it kind of builds on like the first article and just showing how like leaders, especially of a religious type and often usually men, seem to really have just consistently found ways of galvanizing their own audiences and as we've said many times here already, like, and alienating outsiders. And although I don't particularly respect Greg Locke as a intellectual, I will say that he's good at what he does. I mean, he's got, you know, a lot of media attention for these kind of stunts that he seems to pull with a certain degree of regularity. And his I don't know anything about his church attendance, if it's gone up or down with the rise of his like media attention, but there's still people showing up. I mean, there was a video attached in the article of somebody in the congregation while he was saying this, and it looked like a full audience, at least from the person who had the camera on forward. So it's shocking sometimes how many people are willing to hop on that train, but there they are. So, and right in our backyards, you know, in America.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost scary. And when you talk about in-group, out-group, the out-group, like in our case, anybody, even including Christians who don't agree with the book burning, there's no win, right? Because maybe other than to just completely ignore them and make it not newsworthy whatsoever, you know, to just like, they have their burning, they all whoop and holler and cast out demons and they all go back to their houses. That's probably the only way to really minimize this. But
That's what I
any
was thinking too.
response. Yeah,
Like, what
yeah.
do we
Like
do
any
here
response is going
as
to fuel this
onlookers?
behavior.
Like, it's
Yeah.
good to point out, like, this is what's happening. This is some of the psychological things that could be going on as a group. But ultimately, like, he just seems like he's a raging narcissist, and he just like if everybody just turned a blind eye to what he does, would he be interesting anymore? I don't know. But we also I think ideally we would like to get people out of his cult, and you know, continue to comment on these things just for the off chance that somebody from his congregation watches it and it sparks a little curiosity, like, what the hell am I doing burning all these books, or what? You know, this is a little bit crazy. I was thinking about that too, in that like there's got to be a couple people in that crowd who senses the insanity of some of the stuff that's going on. Like, I hope that if he's going to continue to make these demonstrations to make a big fuss over things and get everybody's reaction, like, I hope that there are people in his audience that start to kind of, you know, question how normal is this. I do have a feeling that, as kind of we've come back to many times, that there is this element of control. And I'm thinking about like somebody who's at his congregation, goes to work on Tuesday, and they're like, what'd you do on the weekend? Oh, we had a bonfire. We burned all these books. Somebody from their office might be like, well, that's kind of strange. You know, that's a strange thing to do. I'm wondering how deep the indoctrination goes, that they're going to be expecting that pushback, and that's going to cause either a confirmation bias, or it's going to make them uncomfortable and cause the dissonance. It's just kind of like, who knows? We'll have to kind of see how that plays out. But yeah.
Yeah, I think making people feel uncomfortable is not in a kind of aggressive way. Is the way to go with this, because there was a guy who protested this by burning the Bible and shouting "Hail Satan." I don't think that's the way to go. You know, I think pointing out that burning something because your best invisible friend in the sky is going to give you special cuddles as a reward. It's a ridiculous thing to do, and it just makes you look silly at the end of the day. And I think going down that route is kind of more effective than getting all aggressive and kind of doing counter burnings. Because if you're going to sit there and burn a Bible in response, all they're going to do is say, look, these people are aggressive. They've got we're right all along. If you just point out how silly they look, and as ex-Christian Erin said, when you go to work and somebody's, somebody points that out to you, it can kickstart that thinking process.
Yeah. If I can share like one quick anecdote about that, like as somebody who was part of a charismatic evangelical missionary group for a while, one of the biggest things that caused me dissonance was when I was confronted with apathy about what I was trying to share. Because you're taught from a very young age that your message is like this, this big deal, and that you're going to cause people to push against you or fall away, or they're going to come to Jesus and all this. And when you go out there and you act like this, when people meet you with apathy, like they're like, what are you on about? Like that is dissonance causing in itself. So I don't know, maybe that will be my approach if I run into people like that, to just be like, what's the big deal? Like, what are you so worried about? Like, it does have an effect in that way.
No, I do love that in the case of the book burning. Maybe not so much in the case of like destroying the artifacts and the sites. Like I think
I'm talking just one-on-one, cycle, like the personal things that happen.
Yeah. So I think that there's like sort of a level of this is done to get attention, so let's not give them the attention, and this is actually destructive and harmful, let's stop this behavior. And I think that there's a line there that can be drawn. And I definitely think that while both can be dangerous, one has a more lasting impact than the other, for sure.